over in the chat real quick. There he is. There's everybody. Awesome. Hi, everyone. So first and foremost, there was no launch today. I'm very disappointed.
Very sad.
Oh, but it was,
No.
hey, but my son, my fourth grader, is into it now. Like, he's like, Dad, we got to set alarms for the next 5 possible options and be there 3 hours early. Like, he is ready.
My
How's the
favorite
plan?
thing was
NASA's marketing department is doing great
Yeah,
right now.
How much they're paying Jeff, because it was Jeff who, like, we had to call him in the middle, like, so Jeff, tell us more. How do we?
My favorite though is Patrick and I are in the session this morning, and Patrick's hollering at Oscar, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to watch the rocket take off?" And Oscar says, "You mean like a real one?" I'm like, yes, not in Minecraft. These are real rockets.
Real rocket?
Oh, so good. But we will. We were talking in another session afterwards. You know, we talk a lot about this idea of perseverance or the idea of letdown. And what's it got to be like you wake up in the morning and thinking you're going to space, and then all of a sudden you're not. And you've already been strapped into that thing for 3.5 hours. And it's going to be another 3 hours before you, because they have to unload all the fuel. They've got to get you out of that thing. I just like, what is your mindset going through that? And and talk about having to have some grit and determination, huh? I tell you.
Oh yeah, we thought how like, I mean, my son was like, hold on, Dad, how long have they been in the cockpit? They're just waiting.
Right.
Yeah, sitting there. Same position.
Yeah, check. Yeah, very cool. All right, well, we're going to get started with our AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything session. I was thinking about what we would do for a follow-up to Tech Tool Bonanza that could be just as fun and as freaky for all of you. And I just happened to be over in Reddit, and Reddit does AMAs all the time. And I was like, genius, we can do an educational AMA. How great would that be? So we're going to be doing an Ask Me Anything format here, where I have a list. And for those of you watching, nobody knows who is asking them the question or what the question is.
Just to make it interesting.
Just for fun.
Just, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you when it all happens? So
we don't need any prep.
Yeah, I did appreciate that you were very clear that every question should be personal in nature.
Yes.
Only Stefan's. That's
Only
you didn't
Stefan's.
get them out. Stefan's had to be personal.
Okay.
You
it's about
really
education.
are overestimating my ability for shame, man. There's just nothing.
All right, so we're going to get started here, and I've got a list of kind of the order, and my wife is the only one that knows what the questions are and who has who. So we've even got a third party outside of it. So Stefan, you are first on the list to ask your question to whichever random person you were assigned and whatever your question was. So Stefan, go ahead and get us started.
Shannon, what's up, dude?
Oh no!
All right,
Of all the people.
Everyone else is relieved.
It's okay. It's okay. You seem like a super nice person. I know we've never met in real life or like but like I was like, I got Shannon, and like there are some people on this panel. I was like, oh, I'm gonna roast them. Like I think Dania specifically didn't give me Monica just because she really respects Monica. So, but I saw Shannon, and you're just so nice and kind, and like so. Here's my question. This morning, you posted in our Slack channel, what's the one song that really gets you moving in the morning? So here, live on YouTube, please sing us a rendition of "This Is Me" from the British Showman. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's not a question. That was a request.
And I'm going to ask Danae what the question was you submitted this weekend.
Okay, here's the actual question.
Okay.
All right. Scenario: you're cleaning out your classroom. Okay, it's the end of the year. You're prepping for the summer. There are cobwebs everywhere. Kids haven't been there, so fewer burglars, which is good. However, you come across a very old-looking book. Okay, you open it up, and a genie pops out. Oh, there's my dog. That's super great. My wife is corralling him. Here we go. What a nerd. A genie pops out.
You didn't call your wife a nerd, I hope.
No, the dog. Well,
Okay,
my
okay,
wife's
okay,
a nerd,
okay.
but it's okay. We love her, and I'm dead now. That was a stare. All right, so a genie pops out and tells you that if you subscribe to a YouTube channel that has, I'm just kidding, but if they will grant you, Monica's face, they will grant you one request, okay, but it's pretty specific. They will grant you the power to flawlessly teach one skill to every student you cross paths with in the future.
Are all questions going to be like this?
Oh my goodness.
That
Wow.
skill is up to you to choose. You can flawlessly teach one skill to every single student you cross paths with what is that one skill and why?
Oh man.
Holy cow. Okay. Does it have to be an academic skill?
Oh, absolutely not. One skill.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you want to teach every kid basket weaving? That is your prerogative.
Okay, this is going to get mushy though. That's the problem.
That's good.
Yeah.
The one skill I would love every kiddo to walk away with is confidence in themselves and the ability to be independent in their thinking and their work. I want them to think for themselves. I want them to not rely on others. I want them to be confident enough to feel good about who they are and the gifts that they have to offer the world.
Mm.
Wow.
Great answer, dude. Well done.
Okay. I hope I get applause when it's my turn.
So here's my follow-up question. How do you build the skill of self-confidence?
That's a hard one though. It's something that I really work for in my classroom is trying to build that confidence. And sometimes that confidence comes out of struggle. That confidence comes out of just that reinforcement that you can do this. I know you can. I know sometimes my students think I'm mean because I won't just dive in and give them the answer. I will make them struggle through that process so that they can feel good about what they did at the end. And I'm huge about, I don't let other students, I'll let other students support other students, but I'm not going to let them bail them out of that struggle because I want them to feel that reward in the end when they come out the other side.
I like that.
Love it.
I like that. I think that's such an powerful piece, isn't it? Awesome. Thank you. Chrissy, you get to ask your question next.
Ooh. Gee, I had to go and find it.
Now I'm done.
Yeah, take a breath, Shannon. You did awesome.
Going first is the best spot in some ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're all done. Okay, so my question is for the awesome Chris. Are you ready? All right, here we go.
Oh, is Chris frozen?
Chris looks frozen.
Oh, he's not
Oh, no,
frozen.
Chris.
Oh, he did.
I think he's
He
doing that on
froze.
purpose. He doesn't want to answer the
Suspiciously
question.
He's just sitting really still. He's not really frozen. He's just
Nice
sitting
work,
really
Chris.
still. You're not fooling
He's playing
anybody.
statues. What was that challenge that we all do when we just go to statues? Shall
We're
I
gonna
ask
come-
it anyway? I'm hoping.
Bob keeps popping in and out also.
Well, I got issues with my video.
We know that.
I have issues. I really have issues, but I'm telling you, two different Zoom accounts here. It keeps going in and out.
I wonder if we should skip Chrissy, Jeff, and come
Yeah,
back.
Yeah,
we'll come
to her.
I
back.
think so.
We'll
We'll
come
come
back.
back
We'll
when
come
Chris
back.
is back.
Yeah, come back. All right, next on my list then is Monica.
Woohoo! Let me see. Who was I? Steve Murphy.
Oh,
Ooh.
Yes. To lead into it, how many years have you been teaching, Steve?
22.
20?
Oh, that was too easy.
Okay, no. So I want
No,
you.
no, move on to the next thing. Yes?
That was to lead into the question.
Oh, okay.
So I want you to think back to your very, 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 very first year teaching. And I want to know two things. I want to know what is something you're most proud of from that first year of teaching. And one thing that you're kind of mortified by, like you can't believe you did that in a classroom. You don't know what you were thinking. So what are you proud of from that very first year? And what's something you're kind of embarrassed by?
Let's start with the proud of. I made it. I survived the first year. No.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think I would say in the first year, but although that's what, my dad taught for 30 years, right? So I grew up around teachers, I grew up around administrators, and I know one of the things when you talk to a first year teacher, that honestly is a true statement, right? To survive and make it through and take a deep breath and go to the second year. But I think just the development from beginning to end, right? So when you start at the beginning, you're just kind of trying to get things out there and survive the day and survive what is there. And then by the end, you can be more intentional about what you're planning and what you're trying to do. So I think just becoming more specific about how you're structuring your lessons, how you're putting it together in a way that can be beneficial and good for kids. And so from that beginning to the end, the amount of growth that you see, I guess, is probably the thing that I would be most proud of. And I would say that to any first year teacher or young teachers out there as well, is don't forget about looking back and celebrating. It's one of the things I learned from Bob and coaching golf all the time. And Tyler said it earlier, is there's no celebrations too small to celebrate, right? So making sure that you really take a look and go, all right, here's where I am now. It might not feel like exactly where I want to be. I remember where I was 2 months ago or 6 months ago, right? And that was, I've made progression, and that's something to be proud of and to recognize that, and that you continue to just get better as you put things together and learn new things. So as far as mortified, Jiminy Christmas, how do you answer that question?
I got lots of answers.
Me too.
The things that always come to my mind. Is this PG rated? What is this? Is this? What do we do? It's work. I started teaching 7th graders, right? So that's where I was at. I'm at the high school now, and I teach juniors and seniors and freshmen. But I started teaching 7th graders, and your wording and how you say things is important to 7th graders. I'll leave it at that. Especially in coaching. It's a basketball. It's a baseball, right? It's not. You got to understand where I'm going with that, right? So those are and you learn that very, very quickly, right? That you have to be careful about your words, especially with 7th graders. And I know the middle school teachers here know what I'm talking about, right?
Sure. It's no different in 4th grade. Say the word duty and you use a lesson real fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that would be those would be the things. Yeah.
That's true. I never thought about that. You learn really quick, don't you? Yeah. That's great.
Thank you.
That's
Good
awesome.
job.
Yeah, great work. Chris is back. So Chrissy, Chris
tried to. There he is. Okay.
I tried to escape.
He tried to escape. I'm not gonna let him escape. He's back. So Chrissy, you get to ask your question to Chris.
I'm gonna ask it really quickly before he drops out again. Okay, here we go. Chris, last week you said there's a sweet spot between project-based learning, instructional tech, and just good teaching. If we start, and I hope this doesn't happen for you all, but if you start the new school year still in virtual learning, what could that sweet spot look like for everyone?
Yeah.
Great question.
Great question. So, so that sweet spot is, I think it's really an interesting way to look at where we can move education with distance learning, with moving back into the building, whatever the case is. I love the idea of project-based learning for the structure side of it. In that, so here's what I'm thinking. If we build a structure that the students get choice, they get support through asynchronous videos, they get support through synchronous, whether it's office hours or if we're in building connecting with specific teachers that can support them through the process. The project is just a great way for them to go through the learning process. I think projects allow students to automatically venture into this idea of choice in what the project looks like, what they actually study, and that sort of thing. The sweet spot, though, lies in the fact that we're trying to blend. We're still trying to teach to our specific standards. We're trying to incorporate choice. We're trying to incorporate collaboration. We're trying to incorporate the idea of instructional technology and what it can bring to the classrooms. And if you can live kind of in the world of all those things together, that's the sweet spot I'm looking at. You're not taking away good teaching strategies, because good teaching strategies never go away. But if we can incorporate all three of those concepts into one deal and have the kids create projects that they can do at their own pace, at their own level, they can push forward if they're moving ahead, they can be supported if they're falling behind in the projects. I think that, in my mind, in my world, that's kind of my sweet spot of what I want education to move into.
Mm.
Woo!
And I think
Yeah.
I love it.
and I think it's flexible,
Hard
right?
one.
Like it's gonna flex in and outside of those three circles in some way, depending on day and kid.
If you look at it as a Venn diagram, three circles overlapping each other, you know, that sweet spot, that perfect world is living right in the middle of all three of those: instructional technology, good teaching, project-based learning. But we are going to dive in and out of all of those from time to time.
Well, and here's the other thing. Go ahead and realize how Shannon's answer and my answer fit with what Chris is talking about, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that if you're giving them that choice and you're giving them those different tasks or different challenges, they're going to have to struggle through that, right, Shannon, and be able to
self-confidence,
figure out and build that self-confidence. And as a teacher, as an instructor, we're not going to be great at it the first time we do it, but we're going to get better each time we do it, each project that we put together.
Right. And one thing that's so important, and we talk about this all the time in ReImagine, and Jeff talks about this all the time, is as a teacher, we're setting up the structure for the students to be successful in. And as teachers, if we set up that structure, and if we provide the feedback, and if we provide the support at the end of the project, none of the kids are going to be unsuccessful. They will all have succeeded and learned and achieved the outcome that we want them to achieve. If you
I also think you want to provide that structure, but you almost want that one end. I'm thinking of Jeff's house right now. You want to have one end open because you want to have that flexibility to.
There might be more than one that's open.
Might be, maybe. But
Jeff is
you want to have
living and breathing this.
But you want to have that one end open so that you have the flexibility to move and make adjustments along with your kids, because there's sometimes I think of a project and we start it, but I don't know where it's going to end. I need my kids to help get me to that end point.
Love it. Yeah. And what's really cool about that, Shannon, is when the kids do something or create something that you wouldn't have even thought of before.
Yeah.
It's amazing, right? Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes
highly
back
structured, loosely organized.
I was going to say, doesn't that go back?
How many points do I get?
Monica beat you to it.
I mean, first of all, Murphy finally got it right for like the first time ever. He really says it backwards, and he's like, it's something about organizing and structuring, and I don't remember. But yes, but isn't that what it is, right? Like a highly structured, and we were talking, and I don't remember who was in the cohort today, but I went off about planting your garden. Like there's a structure to growing your garden. Right. And that's structured, but you have to allow things to change, because if it rains for 5 days in a row, you don't then go in and turn on the sprinklers, right? You don't do that. And so there has to be some freedom within the structure so that you still get the zucchini at the end. And we also like to celebrate the zucchini.
That's who said it.
Right?
That's who said it.
Exactly. That's what we were thinking. That's who said it.
I was going to say, Jeff actually described this way better just now, because I just learned something new. Earlier, I was like, hold on, you don't learn when you eat the zucchini? I'm like,
no, but the learning already happened. When you eat the zucchini, you're celebrating the learning of the structure of the thing that you went through.
And because you get to have zucchini bread.
Yes, or grilled zucchini, whatever you want. But
Stefan has a good barbecue sauce analogy as well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Would that be good on the zucchini?
Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
No,
Jeff,
I've been stumbling over that.
We need a moderator. We need a moderator. Jeff has the floor.
No. I think it's just, we have to think of ways that we allow that structure, the highly structured, loosely organized. But there has to be some way to get in there. And the other thing I like that Chris said is, if a true project-based system is set up and the structure is supported in the way that it should be supported, there is no such thing failure at the end, because every failure should have been caught before the product was ever created. Right? Because there should be so many small assessment pieces, summative and formative, in the process that the product just takes care of itself. right? And at any point, you should be able to go in the process and say, oh, that little piece doesn't work. We need to change that little piece. So when a kid gets up to give a presentation, every presentation should be an A at that point, because you should have been involved in the process. And I think that's what we learned. The biggest learning for me anyway, doing project-based learning in the late 90s and doing project-based learning now, is understanding that it's got to be tightly structured, but allow the organization of the learning to happen organically through where students have choice over pace, and best practice comes in. So,
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So Monica asked her a question. So next is Shannon on the list.
All right. I have to pull mine up because I can't remember it. All right. My question is for my friend Chrissy. And my husband helped me come up with this one. All right. So
I'm shaking in my boots.
Yeah, no, it's not about hunting. We could have done a hunting one.
How much does it cost to fly to New Zealand?
Yes.
And bust down?
All right.
Accommodations free.
Okay. Yeah. Me and my husband, we're going to show up one of these days. All right. What is one thing that the New Zealand educational system does that you think the Washington educational system could benefit from?
Ooh.
Nice. Ooh. Well done.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
What was that?
Is someone getting censored right now?
Somebody
Oh,
said
that was the
bad
bell.
word.
She's at school.
Yeah, I said a bad word.
That was the bell.
Oh, I think the most successful thing that the New Zealand curriculum has is that our whole country follows the same curriculum. So no matter where kids go, no matter what school they go to, no matter which place in the country, they have the same curriculum, and there's nothing changes in that sense other than really great teaching or really poor teaching. But I didn't say that. Is that the same in Washington? Is that what happens? Or is it different from school district to school district?
We have the Common Core state standards that we're supposed to kind of follow, but that's, what you do within that, it varies from district to district.
But high schools have different offerings from district to district. So,
So I guess then that would be the thing that I would say we do really, really well, and your state would benefit. Probably the kids would benefit from that. I think teachers too, like when you move from one school to another, you're not having to learn an entirely different thing. You are trained in that curriculum, and you know that curriculum. Well, you're supposed to know that curriculum. You know that curriculum, and it doesn't matter which school you find yourself in. So yeah, I think that would be my answer for you.
Nice job, my friend.
It's interesting because, this, as a country, we've gone back and forth on this idea of a national curriculum, and then at a state level, who has control at a state level, and then from there, what is your control at a local level, at the district. So it's interesting that you say that, because I can see both sides of it. And I think part of it also is inside New Zealand, do you have different states or provinces?
We have provinces, and they have their local councils that have their own bylaws. But generally speaking, we're one country. We have one prime minister, one boss, so to speak. And I think that's one of our three islands.
Sorry,
Don't forget about Stuart.
I know
Oh,
that,
little Stuart out the window there.
I know that because Chrissy was a guest yesterday.
There's a question in the stream, Chrissy, that somebody wanted to know if pace was the same as well. So does everyone follow the same pacing guide? You need to be on this standard on this day?
It's not as exact as that, but we have banded levels. So as you move through school, there is an expectation that you are within those bands, and that's where the flexibility comes in, that, not everybody learns at the same pace. So there's room and flexibility for learning to still meet you where you're at, but continue to push you forward.
Okay.
One of the newer things in our curriculum now is this thing called local curriculum. So our curriculum, even though everyone has the same curriculum documents, there is flexibility within those learning objectives that make up the curriculum that allow us to infuse it with our own localness. Doesn't mean that we can go rogue and teach whatever we like to do with our locality, but it does mean that we can really focus on the things that matter to the communities among which we are teaching, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
That's new.
Interesting. That's cool. And what's your population of New Zealand?
5 million.
5 million.
We just hit 5 million a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Is that like Seattle?
Yeah. it's less than our entire state. Yeah. And so and so I'm thinking like, and this, I mean, I think this is part of the larger conversation is could we have a state curriculum, and how much easier would that be to organize versus 50 different states who there is no, and never has been in this country, a federal oversight of education. States were created, and one of the powers that every state was given was the right for education of that state. So that's how you end up with 50 different curriculums going 50 different directions that have 50 different standards that they get to choose. And like I've talked about in a couple other talks, there's economies of scale at play, which is why you do at some point have to divide and conquer that. Now, does that mean that we shouldn't have national standards that everybody should be able to follow, which we tried, and then some states were decided to say like, no, not for us. And is that okay? I don't know. But yeah, so I think that there's just, at what level do you have to start splitting that off, and what does that look like? But you're right. I think there is something to be said, especially from a teacher standpoint, that if I can go into any district and I know exactly where I'm going to go, I know what the curriculum is, I know how that layout is, there just becomes a continuity for kids and for teachers, and for, right, you're able to build that. So
maybe even continuity of core 4.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Oh.
Sorry, I mean, we have to agree on 4 apps. Like just that's
wow.
That's taken us 3 months just to get
That might be nice within one building if we could.
Yeah, let's start with
one building. That's good.
One building
family. One family.
I like that. That's awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. Jen, you're next up.
I'm next.
Yeah.
Well, guess whose lovely wife gave me your name?
Wonderful.
This will be good.
Oh, I don't know. I kind
There's
of
pressure on this question.
Yeah.
How do I ask?
There's no pressure.
Yeah, whatever. Here we go. So we all know that we have lots of pivotal moments in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So when you began your career in education, your goal was to become a principal.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the pivotal moment or your epiphany that happened to make you change paths from classroom teacher who was headed to become a principal to being a consultant? And part 2, because I had to go big or go home. And now as a consultant, what do you hope your lasting impact on education will be?
Whoa.
Jeez.
Whoa.
Wow.
I like part 2. Part 2 is phenomenal.
You said we have 36 seconds to
36
answer.
seconds.
And your
Okay.
time starts now.
Yeah. So the first part, the pivotal moment, is something that I still think about quite often because it was quite pivotal. I can almost tell you exactly where I was sitting in my computer lab in between a class of kindergartners and a class of 5th graders. It was, I'm going to say like May 2006 at that point. I had started the Thinking Stick that September 2005. And that was I started blogging. And there were very few educational blogs at the time. Blogging was still kind of a new thing. And I happened to be at the time, I think, the only international educator that was blogging. And so I was kind of the only voice coming from this place called Shanghai, China, who was talking about education. And so because there were so few voices sharing their thoughts, that gave you a platform for your voice to be heard. And so very quickly, I was finding out that my voice was spreading farther than I had no idea what I was doing. Just like every blogger, when you get started, you have no idea what you're doing. I'm counting every single view, like 5 people read a blog post, and I'd like go wake my wife up and be like, you're not going to believe this. 5 people read what I wrote. But what had happened was around February of 2006, a assistant principal job came open at Shanghai American School. And my goal in life from the time I was, I'm going to say 17, my goal was to become an elementary principal before I was age 30. So I was 27 and I would have been able to become an assistant principal. And so I have my goals right in front of me. So I apply for this job. I'm one of the 2 finalists. And I sit down with, still today, my good friend, Andy Torres, who was the principal at the time. And he sat down with me and he said, look, he's like, there's 2 of us. We were both internal candidates. And he goes, you need to decide what is your path. He's like, you will make an incredible principal one day. I have no doubt about that. And if that's your path and that's what you want to do, I will support you in that. But I also know that you have this other path that is starting to be your passion. And you need to think long and hard around what is that? What is that? Where do you want to go? He goes, because here's what I don't want. I'm not going to hire you as my assistant principal only to have you quit a year from now to go be an IT director. Like, you can't, I'm not going to do that. So that was a pivotal moment for me because I had to make a choice and basically give up a dream that I had been living and focused on for this thing that I didn't know. I had no idea what any of this, and this was just at this time to teach kindergarten and 5th grade technology. I mean, that's really what I was doing at the time. And so that was a pivotal moment because I gave up on that dream to focus on what was the path for technology and technology moving forward. So that was a huge pivotal path. I never became a principal. I let my administration certificate run out and never took that path. Meanwhile, I dove into the technology thing, and things happen. And next thing you know, you're writing for books, and one thing leads to another, and Twitter comes out. You make everybody sign up for it at a conference, and just things happen. So that's that. As far as the second part of the question, I think the hardest thing to do as a consultant for every consultant is leaving the classroom. That is the hardest thing because at some point something has to give. At some point, of course, in a perfect world, I would still be teaching 4th grade and being a consultant. In a perfect world, absolutely. But it can't work. You don't have enough time in the day. The schedules don't work out. At some point, you have to make a decision. And so once you make that decision to become a full-time consultant, you start thinking, you have to also keep thinking on a scale that gives you even more power. So I am constantly, and anybody who's worked with me knows that I talk about this quite often, is that every time that I present, one of the things that still gives me butterflies is I start to count the number of teachers in front of me times how many kids they teach and how far is your influence. So as a classroom teacher, I got to my largest class size, I think, was 36 at one point. So I got to influence 36 lives. Every time that you're in front of a group, you get to influence however many teachers times 25 kids or 30 kids. So in the work that we're doing here, and I think you've all heard me say this a number of times, like we've got almost 3,500 teachers times, how many kids? Like we're impacting the lives of 120,000 kids easy across the state. And to me, that is what drives me forward, is thinking about the lives that you can impact with just one teacher. And it's not about any of the big stuff. It's not about any of this, but hearing teachers reflect, hearing teachers come back and tell a success story of, oh my gosh, I tried this and it worked for that kid. Oh, I had one kid show up to an office hour and I got to connect with that kid. That's the reason why you do the work. The reason why you do the work doesn't change. The scale of which you can impact changes. And that, I think what excites me more than anything.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
Okay. Yay.
Good
question.
Good question.
Yeah, that
Good
was
question.
a great question.
Yeah. That pushed me. That was good. Bob, you're next up. Bob, who's your question for?
Hey, my question is for Tyler.
Oh.
Yeah, Tyler, my good friend. Just so you know, my computer crashed, so I'm here on my phone for the first time. New learning for me. Woohoo! Yeah.
Hey!
Tyler, you've been assigned a class of high school seniors for their final 4 weeks of school, and you can teach them anything around one topic, but they can't choose. You have to. What would that topic be? And
Oh,
Wow.
Oof. Is it, clarifying question, content or skill, or does it matter?
doesn't matter. It's based on what you value and believe about the work.
You know, I'm
wow, Bob,
I'm-
you're supposed to go with like a softball question. You didn't do that.
I think he asked the right person. I'm just saying.
I know, I
I'm sitting
think
here
you
going,
guys-
thank God I didn't get Bob. Jesus.
I think it's going to come down to being critical about the sources they're using to teach themselves. Because I think part of that is you're teaching them, you can teach yourself, which when I think about the seniors that are going to spend 4 weeks with me and then walk out into the real world, I want them walking out knowing no matter what I encounter, I have the skills to be able to find what I need to teach myself. Because I think about everything I've done as an adult, I didn't have a teacher. I had to figure it out. I had to learn how to break down those resources to keep that learning going. But I also think part of it too, there is so much power in the internet, but there's also a lot of power in being someone who understands how to be critical about the way that we're approaching the internet. Because I think it's really easy to Google the answer and just go with whatever's on top. But I think learning to be that person that is willing to Google the answer and Google the answer and Google the answer and take the time and understand the value in taking that time to develop a broad understanding of a topic. I think that's something that sadly a lot of times seems to be missing these days, where we've taught students maybe that first step of, hey, look, you can go to the internet and learn anything. You can go to the internet and find whatever you want to find is the reality of it. But teaching them that you're not going to the internet to find what you want to find. You should be going to the internet to find what's true and what's reliable and what's valid and what's worthwhile. And so I think that idea of teaching students how to be critical evaluators of information online isn't just about here's what you need to stay away from, but like, what are you running towards, right? Like what is the stuff that you're using to truly teach yourself? And so I think part of it is I want kids to know that I can teach myself, kind of going back to what Shannon said about being confident, right? I want them to know that I might not know it and that's okay, but I know how to get it, but also being confident online of, I know that what I'm looking at is something that's worth looking at. I know that I've done the work, I've dug in, and I can really prove to myself that this is true. So I think that idea of if they can leave my classroom as a critical evaluator of information, I will feel confident that they'll be successful in life no matter what they run into. So I guess that's my answer, critical evaluation.
I love that.
Wow. Yeah. Nice.
So true.
You got the title of the course as well, critical evaluation.
That's basically English class. If we're doing it right, that's the title of English class, critical evaluation. That's really what it is.
Shouldn't it? And why isn't it? Can somebody answer me that? ELA teachers, why isn't that like the core?
Because
All
the
right, good talk.
Because the standard says English 9 and 10. That's probably why it's not critical evaluation 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Because there's like one standard out of 300, right? That
Because we have
say
30 copies of a book, and we have to do that book every year because we have 30 copies of it.
And I grew up learning how to write essays, so my kids also need to learn how to write. I still have yet to find the answer to, but what happens when my kids have to go write essays in college? And I'm like, change that too, man. I don't know.
Well, I even got to the point in my classroom, I don't say reading and writing, and it takes way longer to say it, but now I say critical consumption and powerful communication. Because when we say reading and writing, it's like, this is what we're locked into.
Somebody quote that. Somebody put
Write
that
that
in
down.
the chat. Write that
down.
But I think it's important for them to understand the majority of the text they need to interpret are not going to be printed anymore. And
So
so if we're
true.
just saying reading,
Yeah.
we're like, hey, these are the skills that are going to apply to the things you're not doing all the time, versus these are the skills that apply to what you're doing all the time. And please continue to use them in your real life, not just in English class.
We need that again, Tyler.
Critical
Uh,
consumption.
Critical consumption.
and powerful communication.
Powerful communication.
I swear the word.
Chrissy said productive presentation, productive something.
I swear the first time he said it, the word zucchini was in there somewhere. I don't know.
Hey,
I still don't think I got it right.
Tyler is my English teacher.
Fantastic. All right. Chris, you're up next with
Yeah.
your question.
Awesome. Patrick.
Yay!
Ooh.
Yeah. Okay, Patrick, I'm going to throw you in the Wayback Machine. You ready?
Okay.
What was a time that sticks out in your memory about that you had a breakthrough connection or a special connection with a student or a group of students? No names. Could be in the class. I know you coached a lot. Could be as a coach athlete connection. Describe the moment you knew you'd reached them and how you made that connection.
Ooh.
Nice.
Ooh.
wow.
You know, it's a good question when everybody goes, ooh.
Golly. Sheesh. That is the Wayback Machine. I mean, this one's hard because right now, my brain is flipping through a number of humans, right? Like people I care about that at the time were kids. And I've got lots of stories going through my head. And I guess the point that I'd first want to say is, I mean, it's about relationships. And if you got into teaching, likely it wasn't because you were really interested in history and specifically the Bay of Pigs invasion. And like you got in because you wanted to see people grow and you wanted to work with folks as they improved and you get to help them through that struggle. And so, yeah, I'm like, what? And I just had a bunch of kids run through my head that are no longer kids. Gosh, you know, the one and telling a story without using names. So I'm jumping to, and I wished I could do this over again, right? Because I don't know if I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell, but I'm going to say this one kid who I feel like actually, and it was in a coaching experience, and in the end, I made a decision that, because it was a team thing, right? So we're playing sports and we're doing the team thing, and a decision that actually impacted them individually in a way that didn't allow them to shine as much as maybe they or their parents would have wanted. And I guess I would say the thing that where I know I was connecting with them is that I never stopped being direct. We had this conversation once about like, well, I could stop coaching you. I could stop saying you're doing this well, and here's what you could do to improve, right? I could just keep going, yeah, you're doing well on this one thing, but not bring up that other thing and not give that extra step. If I start doing that, where I'm just praising you, you could know that I'm giving up. And we went through a tough time where the parents were actually quite irritated with me and whatever. And I think probably 2 days in a row, I actually kind of didn't do the second piece of my feedback, which is keep doing this. Next time, try this. And when I didn't for like 2 days in a row do the next time, try this, she came up and said, hey, I know that things are hard right now with my parents and blah, blah, blah. Please keep telling me what I need to try next. Don't give up on me. And yeah, I mean, it's like, and in a coaching context, it's the same as in the classroom, right? Like that's my feedback cycle is you're doing this well, next time try this, because you're always trying to get that extra piece of growth. And I would say to this day, what's cool is this student is now an adult and they're now a teacher. And I didn't know it at the time, how impactful maybe that scenario was. But, we've had conversations about that now. And so how did I know? Well, I know now because that kid wants to maintain those connections with me, which is an honor, right? Like I'm because I screwed up a million times in this relationship, right? I by no means was perfect in that, but she taught me the lesson of don't give up on people. Keep telling them, keep doing this, and next time try this. And because we don't know how high those kids can fly.
What I love about that story is it reminds me of, if I think of the best coaches and the best teachers I had, they weren't the easy coaches and easy teachers. Isn't that funny? Like, as you're telling that story, I'm thinking like, man, the teacher that I love / was frustrated with the most is the teacher I still have a relationship with today, Mrs. Halpern, my 4th grade teacher. Right?
By the way, I'm going to say that question should be one that when we finally are able to get together, that we all should have to answer.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I'm like,
we don't have time right now, but we all have to answer. But Patrick, you did a great job of explaining, because I talk to my kids about it all the time, about being teachable and being coachable. That's the terminology that I use, right? Because teachers are coaches, coaches are teachers. That's what we are, right? But being teachable, being coachable. The idea that I'm not going to just tell you you're doing a great job if you're not. And you shouldn't want that. You should want me to be able to say, as your teacher or as your coach, this is how you could potentially get a little bit better, right? Because we don't know everything. And so, but you're right, there's tons of growing pains that come with that until they kind of realize it, that we've experienced on the coach or on the player side or on the student side, that we now are experiencing on the coach side or on the teacher side. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Absolutely. And what I love, Patrick, when I crafted that question, I almost hesitated to come up with that question, because I knew, knowing you and knowing this, having worked with this group enough, that you've had an impact on a ton of kids and they've had an impact on you in return. So for you to choose one would be quite difficult. And I love the fact that you just brought it back. It's all about relationships. It's all about not only the relationship to the student, but from the student to you. And that's so powerful. It was really cool. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great question.
That's good.
Applause. Patrick, applause.
We've run out of time.
Your applause.
Tyler, you're next.
All right. Well, I feel like I need to build suspense with who it's for. My question. Yeah, I know at this point there's like 4. My question is for Jen.
Oh.
So I feel like all the time we hear teachers say, my kids can't use technology if they're like in 1st grade or in 2nd grade or kinders. So my question is, what are some of the most powerful ways that we could use technology with our younger students?
Good question.
Oh, nice.
Nice question.
This hits at my passion of what I've been working and doing for the last, officially 2 years, but before that, it's like, okay, our littlest ones are so stinking capable of doing so much, and we forget how capable they really are, and that you take them through. Of course, you have to teach them. So it's not like when you bring out a piece of technology with an older student and they already know how to use some of the stuff and they're more self-sufficient and they can just kind of roll with it. We know with our younger kids, we have to explicitly teach them some of the pieces. But once you teach them some of the basics, the ability for them to share their thinking with you in a format that's not just writing. We often say, oh, write down your thoughts. Well, our littlest ones can't necessarily write down their thoughts, but boy, you put them in front of Flipgrid or you put them on Seesaw and you have them tell you what their thinking is, you will be amazed. You will be amazed at those little 1st graders who can navigate through several menus in Seesaw to read something, practice something, and then tell you what their learning is. And they don't even think twice about it. And teachers come back to me and say, well, my kids can't do that. Yes, they can. Does it take longer in a kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade classroom? Of course it does. We've got all of that background stuff. They didn't learn to read overnight either. So I think that when we make excuses for our kids that they can't do it, it's really us that doesn't want to put in the time to help them learn how to do it, because they are capable. And is it chaotic and is it messy? Oh, yes. It is so chaotic and messy to walk into a kindergarten classroom and teach them how to use Google Slides. And I teach the same lesson, whether it is kindergarten or whether it's high school. You're going to learn to put in a background, you're going to learn to put in a text box, and you're going to put in an image. Those 3 things. And kindergartners can do it.
Yes, they can.
So I think that we lose the ability for our littlest ones to really share their thinking, and especially in a distance learning situation where we can't be with them. The most powerful thing we can do is actually hear what they're thinking and how they're processing. And if we're not using technology to help us with that, we are really, really missing out on tapping into those little ones.
I love that.
Can we ask follow-up questions? That was awesome, by the way.
Beautiful.
Can we ask follow-up questions, or since I'm done, nobody can ask me a follow-up? Jen, what about a parent or a teacher that says, I'm concerned with screen time for my
Yeah, and I get it. Of course, we're concerned with screen time, but screen time is when you're sitting and you're maybe playing your video games after school, or you're sitting and binge watching a TV show. In my mind, that's screen time. But when you are using the screen to learn and to communicate, and our 5-year-olds can collaborate, it just looks different than our older kids. Hi, Tyler.
Hi, Tyler.
We miss on that opportunity to really tap into them. And I just lost my train of thought. Did you see it? I waved goodbye to it's gone. So, but I think
screen time looks different.
It does. And when you're using it to learn, I think that's another thing we have to train our parents to understand, that there is different levels of screen time.
And
I love
we can't lump
Chrissy's
it all.
comment.
Yeah,
Screen
we can't
time
lump it
versus
all
screen
into
quality.
one thing. Yeah. It's not one thing. It's talking to grandma. It's collaborating with a partner. It's learning to read. It's whatever it is. It's learning to play the ukulele. It's researching NASA's launch today because it's a current event. It's a million different things. It is not one thing called screen time.
I love that. I was just thinking as you were talking too, I just Googled because I can't remember exactly what the number is, but research has found that the average 7-year-old asks 300 questions a day. And I'm just thinking there's no way a 7-year-old can write down 300 questions away, but is there a way that technology could capture some of that? Like, how could you even as a teacher leverage technology to capture? And that, if anybody wants to know how hard it is to be a kindergarten or first grade teacher, 300 times 20, right? Like, let's just do the math. How many questions are coming at you in a day? As
And a lot of them involve, but why? But why?
But why? That's at least half of the 300 is just, but why? Yeah. But I think there's so many ways. You're so right. There's so many ways to use technology to capture all sorts of learning. The inquisical side as well as the learning side. So good. So good. All right. Let's see. Who asked that one? Tyler asked that one. Patrick, your turn.
Great. My question is for Monica. Monica, aren't you relieved it's not Stefan asking you a question?
Hey, I was.
I think that was on purpose.
All right, Monica.
Yes.
How many YouTube subscribers? No.
I can answer that real quick. Monica, don't worry. I've got this and I'll carry this one for you.
No, okay. Monica, no, seriously. So there are a bunch of teachers at year 0, okay? And they're about to go out into their first classroom. They are going to start their teaching career this coming fall. And they are going to go out into one of 253 different permutations of online learning, virtual learning, face-to-face learning, blended learning. Who knows what it's going to look like?
Run.
So, since we've all been just figuring out this emergency distance learning thing anyway, and we don't know exactly what's coming, what advice would you give them? These new teachers?
Good question. And I'm assuming we're K-12 teachers, doesn't matter what age level, any of it. First year teachers out of the bat have no idea. It's collaborate with your colleagues. You have experts in your building, and don't be afraid to ask. As an instructional coach, there are people out there that are just begging to give you the support that you need, and it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. One of my very, very first years as a tech coach, I had the best teacher ever was my best friend, and she had me in her classroom all day, every day, because she always wanted to get better. And I think people think coaches are just for those teachers that are struggling. That's not true. I had the world's best teacher who wanted to get better. So that seems like a pretty simple answer, but just asking for help, and know that you don't have to do everything. Pick one thing and do that one thing well. I mean, we talk about a core 4, maybe you just want to pick one and keep it simple. Pick one thing that you're going to be really, really good at and just start there. You've got to give yourself grace and forgiveness and know that it will get better and the kids will survive. When I asked Steve the question of think back to your first year teaching, I feel so bad for those kids who were in my class because I had no idea what I was doing. But I think there is a few things that I did and I did well. And I definitely ask those around me for help and support.
Awesome. Yeah, great advice.
I think the other thing, and I don't know if this is for anybody else in this group, it's a great question. And as you were talking, Monica, I just was like, what's one thing that I think I remember and still to this day, because I think it's a lifelong learning skill, is find your mentor. And it's not the assigned mentor. Like it could be the assigned mentor you get, but many times I find that's not who ends up being your mentor. You know, find that person that you can go to, that person you can bounce ideas off of. And even every time I change schools, I somehow, and I don't even know, I wish you could write a book on like, how do you find the perfect mentor? And I don't know if there's a perfect recipe, but I think you find people that push you, that are there for you, that understand you, that can support you when you need support, but also just there to listen. I just think about like the mentors throughout my life, you know, who I always somehow stumbled upon a mentor that supported me in my work. I don't know if that's for anybody else too, but you just kind of find them. I don't know if there's a secret sauce.
And I think the secret sauce is being open to it.
Yeah,
you know, right there, like looking for a mentor. And that was Monica's answer essentially, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask.
We're so lucky in our district. We have Anna Griffith, who is our best supporter, beginning educator support team.
Yep.
And it is her passion, and she is so amazing at what she does, and we share office space, and she comes back with these stories of these first year teachers. And she does have the graph, Jen, you shared the stages of grief with COVID, but she has the stages of the first year teaching, and there's definitely some highs and lows along the way. And she does a phenomenal job with those first year teachers. It is tough.
Well, and I think it's significantly important to find a mentor that has similar values. Like you could find a mentor that sends you in a wrong direction.
Yes.
Right. Like so you have to have an idea, or I would say to first year teachers, have an idea of what you want and don't give up on that particular belief, because you could find a mentor that's going to send you down a negative path or down a wrong way. We always talk about leaders. Leaders can be positive, leaders can be negative. And so when you find that person that has that similar value set that you have, to latch onto it, and not to get sentimental, but one of my mentors is in this room or in this Zoom meeting right now, right, Bob? So the idea of, you know, not just a close friend, but somebody who was one from the time I first talked with him on the phone when I was coming out to Enumclaw, that I knew was going to be somebody that was going to change my career. So it's significant to have that person in your life that allows you to grow and allows you to be able to do that. But I think being open to that is significant as well, like Patrick said.
And again, your mentor's
Thanks,
not
Bob.
always going to maybe tell you what you want to hear.
Hey, Steve.
They're gonna be honest with you and push you, and that's what Bob did for you, and that's what a good mentor can do for a good first year teacher.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we've got 2 of us left. That's between myself and Steve. Still haven't asked our questions. And according to my list, I'm supposed to ask my question next. So my question is for Bob. Are you ready, Bob?
Yes.
Stefan is coming up.
We left Stefan for last.
Oh my God.
All right.
Pressure.
All right. So here you go, Bob. Here's your question.
Okay.
Explain why you say and believe every kid is a career kid, and how does that translate to elementary age students?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Here's what I would say is part of what we do as educators is all the time we talk to kids about what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? In other words, we know that every kid is part of the purpose of schooling is to help them grow as people, to become better people. And but it's also to make a contribution to our society. And so part of that involves the world of work. It involves a career of some type. And so when we say that every student is a career student, that means that, you know, potentially every student is going to contribute to our society somehow. And so I think it's important to talk to kids about what they want to be, but also it's important to talk to kids about who they want to be. And so when I say every student is a career student, I mean that I want them to contribute to society in a way that's meaningful, that helps our society continue to grow as a world, as a community, and so I don't mean that and you shouldn't stop learning. Here's the old guy. You should be a career student. Some people look like that, think that you should be in school your entire life. I think every day is an education if we look for those opportunities around us. And so every student is a career student, period. And sometimes it has something to do with a particular job, but it also has something to do with who we are as a human race, really.
So good.
Bob, I love that because my 23-year-old nephew was giving my 17-year-old son advice and talking about college and where am I going to go and what am I going to do? And my 23-year-old nephew, his comment was, and I wrote it in the chat, don't worry about what you're going to be, worry about who you're going to be. And then he also said, don't worry about what you're going to do, worry about how you're going to do it. And I was just like, what? For my nephew to say that, I'm like, I'm going to get that tattooed on my arm.
So cute.
Yeah.
I mean, right now he's a waiter. And he said, I know I'm not going to be a waiter forever, but I'm a really good waiter. I know that I'm doing a good job and I'm proud of the work I'm doing. So these kids are smart.
Yeah. And that's part of our job as educators. What knowledge, what skills, what experiences do we create in our classrooms to help our kids grow as people and find their passions and their interests and all the things we've been talking about in ReImagine Ed.
And it's okay if they don't know it by age 18, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Shocker.
Absolutely.
If only I knew everything that I knew, right? Jeez. It's just the way it goes. All right, Steve, you're last up. You and Stefan.
How do you know it's Stefan?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, where's the suspense?
Yeah, where's the suspense? Stefan gets no suspense, although he's had to wait the whole time. Why?
That's enough suspense for Stefan.
Why do I feel the need, though, that I should tell Monica to mute her microphone while I ask this question? I don't know. So, Stefan. No, not
you
Stefan.
can't. I checked. I'm sitting here scrolling over the pictures. At least I don't have the ability to mute other people.
You've tried. You've already
last
tried.
time.
All right, here we go. Because tomorrow is Thursdays with Stefan for us, right? So we get it tomorrow.
Sir.
We're rocking that. So we're ready to go. But a lot of you out there in YouTube land don't necessarily know that a lot of us haven't met in person yet. So Stefan and I, our relationship is like this, right? It's on Zoom. But it's been awesome because you have such energy and passion for what you believe in. And it's inspiring it to be a part of. So I appreciate that. It's inspiring. It's admirable. But however, we got a lot of our professionals across Washington State that are overwhelmed with how to approach this new reality, right, of distance learning and what's going on. So as an instructional coach or as a colleague, because this has come up in some cohorts, what would your approach be to support and encourage a colleague that's struggling to buy into this blended learning model? Not just because it's necessary, but truly because it's the best learning for student agency in 2020. So how would you help them if they're struggling with why to buy into moving forward in this different direction of producing educational and learning opportunities?
Man, that's a good question. So I'm not a great coach. We'll start off by saying that, because like
How can I mute him if he says that?
I'm a bull in a china shop, dude, which works really well in a middle school classroom, right? And I told Monica when I came to this job, I am going to build relationships by just being a workhorse, because that's what I know. And I am going to build those relationships that way. And I know that all of that, is built off a relationship, but that doesn't always work for everybody's learning style. And so if I am, and this is not a foreign concept, so if I'm working with a teacher who's struggling to buy in, and this is going to be so underwhelming, my approach is to listen. Like I, for once in my life, shut my mouth and I listen. And I'm not good at that, because you're right, I do get so excited. And I would always joke with my colleagues that I'm an overpaid clown in the classroom, and I'm here, I put on this animated version of myself and I crank it up to 11 and we party. And that is authentic. I believe it. I love it. I'm thinking back to Chris's question about Patrick. Like I miss the kids, but I love good teaching. I love good teaching, right? And that's what my job is talking about good teaching. And so sometimes I just have to get out of my own freaking way and stop talking, and what I have found is that without exception, teachers want to do what's best for kids. They do. They care about, you don't get into teaching for the money or the fame. You get into it because you want to make connections with kids and you want to do what's best for kids. And this goes back to what Chris said, is when he was talking about finding the sweet spot. You don't throw out good teaching, because everything we're talking about is good teaching. It just looks different. And I'm going to blatantly plagiarized from Jeff, but something he tells people in Moses Lake is that we can't teach the kids today like we learned, because our world is radically different and things have changed so fast that it takes time to grapple with that. So at the risk of sounding like a broken record, there's nothing that I can do in a moment to move you from resistance to acceptance, because that's something you have to accept, that you have to go through that journey yourself. And the only way to do that is to listen and let people know that you're there to serve and to support. That's been my mantra through all of this with teachers, is I am only here to serve and support. And sometimes that just looks like, tell me what you want for kids and how I can help with that. And the frustrating part about that is it's not always immediately effective, and as teachers, we should be okay with that, obviously, but you don't know the kinds of lasting impacts that you make. And sometimes you just have to be patient and know that you're not always the right person to give the right answer. So the best thing you can do is just to sit and listen.
Teaching is a delayed gratification profession.
For sure.
Right? You don't see it right in the moment.
Well,
and by the way, just like Monica posted, because I've watched Stefan in the many different Thursdays with Stefans we've had, don't let him fool you. He's an amazing coach. He's an amazing.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite stories is Stefan. And when Stefan became a coach, someone else applied for the position that was at the high school. Stefan wasn't at the high school. And Stefan got the job. And a couple months into it, that teacher emailed Stefan and said, I applied for the job too, and I didn't want to like you. But you have done a phenomenal job, and I'm so impressed. I see why you got the job. You're making a difference in our building. You are the best person for this job. And for that teacher to reach out and tell Stefan that was a real vulnerable thing for her to do, and something that he deserved to hear.
Nice.
This is very uncomfortable.
I love the message too, because I think I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think too often, especially as people in leadership positions or coaches who are supposed to be there to support, we can overtalk. It's way too easy because people come to us and our original mindset is to go into solution mode without really taking the time to, sometimes people come to you because they just need to tell you something without you fixing the problem. And being able to be open to listening, which is why this amazing counselor I know, who I happen to also be married to, every single day before I go to work, the last thing she says to me before I leave is, don't forget to listen. It's every single day for now, as long as I can remember, she always reminds me, like, don't forget to listen, like listen first before you try to solve problems. And
He's even told you that when you've been on your way out to dinner with me.
Probably. Like,
but it's a great message, right? Like in all
message. It's so
don't
good.
forget to listen.
Don't forget to listen.
I love it, Jeff.
Yeah, it's such a good message, and I think you're right. You're spot on. Like when you were struggling against somebody else that you're trying to convince their mindset, asking that simple question. And I remember what you said, what do you want that's best for your kids? And then just allow space, because teachers will talk themselves into what is best for kids. And then you're there to support that because this is what's best for kids, but sometimes we need to be reminded that that's where we start from. So I love that. I think it's such great advice. All right. Well, that's our hour. I don't see any questions in the chat. I was seeing if anything came up I don't see anything coming up from there. Any final thoughts from the crew here? How was your first AMA?
Survive.
Awesome.
Over.
I survived. I'm still going.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Yeah.
Patrick's like, no way.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I totally appreciate you giving up an hour of your day to make this video and to be there for people, whoever happens to see this in the future. Like you said, the teaching business is what did you say? Extended gratification business, or what did you say?
Delayed gratification.
I got another quote. You're quoting me again. You quoted me last time.
And I messed it up just like you mess up mine all the time. So it's that's delayed gratification business, right? Like we're making this video and you don't know who's going to watch it.
There you go. I want you to get it right next time we have a cohort together.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's good. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Really appreciate hanging out with us tonight or whenever you happen to be watching this video. And remember to listen and do what's best for kids.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're not live.
We're done.
We're not.
Someone asked about Grizzlies versus Gorillas.